Hey everyone, welcome to 41 Strong Podcast. My name is Chuck Tate. Great to have you with us today. 41 Strong is a podcast that offers encouraging scriptures and stories for people like you to hold on and stand strong. For more information about 41 Strong or 41 Will Come, you can visit my website, chucketate.com. I also want to let you know that we have a 7-day reading plan now available on YouVersion for those of you that have the Bible app on your phone. Well, today is episode 123, and my guest is Jolene Underwood. She is the founder of Rise Up Writers. She's going to tell you more about that later on in the podcast. But first, let me officially welcome her to the podcast. Jolene, welcome to 41 Strong. Great to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Chuck. I'm excited to chat with you and talk about 41 Strong.
Yes, and we actually met like a few years ago. I was just talking to you on the phone before we started that back in 2015 when I won my publishing contract at Rewrite Conference in Austin, Texas. You are from the Austin area, and you were at Rewrite.
I was, and I clearly remember when that contract was awarded, and I just remember seeing your face when you got up on stage, and I looked at you, and there was something in my spirit that just connected with the passion inside of you to not just have won a book contract, but that there was something about what you were writing that was so passionate within you that the message needed to be shared, and here you were going to get an opportunity to do it through a traditionally published book, and I just was super excited for you.
Well, thank you so much, Lee. I really appreciate that. It's a moment that I'll never forget, and kind of cool that last week on our episode 122, Whitney Gossett from Fed Agency was in the house and kind of reliving that 2 weeks in a row. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about you and your ministry and your passion, and I want to talk about the things that God is doing in you and through you. I'm really honored that you would take the time to hang out with us today because I know you have a lot to offer. And you call yourself an emotional health warrior, a soul care mentor. And as a pastor, I know how many people struggle with emotional health and soul care. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? How did you end up being this emotional health warrior? I know that something happened years ago that ignited this passion, but why don't you just give us a little bit of an introduction and a glimpse into your story and how this came about?
Yeah, sure. So initially, it kind of started way back after high school when I ended up in an eating disorders clinic with significant depression and self-harm. And at the time, I knew that I needed healing, obviously, because I was having these outward expressions of pain. But I had a lot of personal insight that I didn't even know that I had until my therapist said, "Wow, you're very insightful." And I was like, okay, well, I have no idea what to do with that. And a friend recently pointed out to me kind of this full circle where I went through another extreme season of pain and then healing, where God brought about ways to actually receive his healing, where that insight became something that was actually practical and applicable in my life. So what happened is we had served through various ministries over the years, homeschooling, running a nonprofit library. And then back in 2012, our family moved to live on a ranch where we took care of foster children, and we had up to 12 children at a time in our home. We lived there for 14 months. It was not land that was owned by us. It was owned by the foster agency. And we came home after those 14 months. Well, I should say, when we came home, I pretty much collapsed. I was not able to function well, and I had an elder that looked at me, and he was the first one to say, "Jolene, you're showing signs of PTSD." And he said, "Trauma." And I looked at him and I was like, "Trauma? I don't have trauma. The kids I dealt with had trauma." And so I started realizing not only did I need healing from the trauma that I'd experienced then, but old wounds that never got healed when I was in the clinic before. That insight didn't do me much good to actually receive the healing that I needed. And so I was at a point where I had been diagnosed with acute anxiety, the signs of PTSD, significant depression, and I just knew this was a pivotal point in my life. I could either choose a path of healing or I could let it completely overtake me.
Hmm.
And so I said, okay, Lord, let's go on a path of healing. I don't want to live the way that I've lived all my life before. Even when things were kind of okay, there was still all these underlying fears and things that fueled anxiety within me that just escalated and were so exacerbated at the ranch and afterwards. And so it became a passion of mine to pursue the healing process with God, whatever that looked like. And it took a number of different paths over the last several years, and I'm still on it. But what happened during that process of healing is my passion for other people to experience emotional growth and facing old wounds and even current patterns that actually started years ago, and doing the hard work within their soul so that they can experience more of God, continue to grow. And it actually played off old passions that I forgot that I had in Christian counseling and my bachelor's degree in psychology. And so it all kind of culminated together in the last few years to do what I'm doing today.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. Well, I mean, and I just got to backtrack for a second. Up to 12 foster kids. Is that all at one time? I mean, was that, I mean, throughout your journey of fostering kids, I mean, how many did you have in a home at one time?
It was a total of up to 12 children in our home at one time, because we brought 3 of our biological children with us. We had one boy, a teen, who had been living with us. He was there for a short while. So we had anywhere from 5 to 9 foster children in addition to our children the whole time we were there.
Wow. Wow. Bless you. And helping them navigate their issues, obviously, eventually kind of carried over onto you. Is that basically what you were saying a little bit?
Yeah, I had a kind of a parenting paradigm and a life paradigm shift while I was fostering, where I realized that managing behavior just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you might kind of know, but when you're faced with a situation with children whose behavior comes from a place of emotional pain and other things, whether there's just been developmental trauma or whatever, you have to think beyond the ways that you've thought before and find new ways to reach their heart, because if you don't reach the heart first, the behavior change doesn't matter.
Gotcha. Well, you mentioned you're still on your journey to healing, and I mean, it's always going to be a journey for all of us. I noticed there was a post you made within the last couple of days, and I don't remember it exactly, except for basically the gist of the meme was, or what you were saying was, oftentimes when we run into people who are struggling with anxiety and depression, as a Christian, oftentimes we kick in with these automatic responses like, just trust God, man. Just trust God. It's like,
Yeah.
you're struggling, just trust God, without leaning in and sitting with somebody, crying with somebody, actually hearing them, praying with them. Can you shed a little bit of light on that post?
Yeah, one of the things that I was trying to convey was that one of the reasons that we tend to do this, because I do it too, is I believe that we have a hard time dealing with our own anxiety at someone else's discomfort. Because we want to fix things. It's kind of the nature from the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, right? We want to figure it out for ourselves and know how to make things better, but we need to rely on Christ. And what we kind of forget as believers who want to do well and are striving in the Christian life is that there's so much more receiving and the beauty of God's presence in the struggle and in those hard times, that it's not up to us. And actually, we might be either playing God or just shutting down our own humanity, our own ability to connect with God in a place of doubt and confusion. It's okay to have those feelings and to wrestle through those moments. That's an opportunity to really experience more of God. And so I think in a head knowledge sort of way, we're starting to become more aware as believers in general that we don't necessarily need to say something trite, but we don't necessarily practice simply being present.
Yeah, that's good. In fact, that reminds me of a time when I was an inexperienced youth pastor years ago. I've been pastoring the church that I lead for 20 years, and prior to that, I was in youth ministry for 8 years. And my very first youth pastor position, I think I was like 19. That's when I got licensed and ordained. And I had a guy come into the youth group he was actually 18, so I was pretty close to the same age as him, right? But he was a part of it, and he was unchurched, and his life was a mess, and he was on drugs and just struggled with multiple issues, emotional health. And I'll never forget, he called me about 3 o'clock in the morning, and this is, of course, before cell phones, and I was living at home, and the phone rang, and got on the line with him, and he was tripped out, he was strung out. I don't know if he was high or drunk, but he was not in a good place, and he was just screaming into the phone. And in this conversation, he said he had a gun, and he said, I want you to just give me a reason why I shouldn't pull this trigger. That's one of the things that he said to me. And
Oh, wow.
I was kind of shell-shocked in that moment. And being young in ministry, I said something that I've learned never to say unless it's true. And I said, hey, man, I know how you feel. And I didn't. Had I, it would have been okay to say that. I said, I know how you feel. I know what you're going through. And the reality is I had no clue at what he was going through. I was raised in church my entire life. My dad was in ministry, and I practically came out of the womb saved. And he just began to yell at me. It's like, you don't know what I'm going through. You don't know where I've been. And it rocked me. And I said, you know what, dude, you are absolutely right. I am so sorry. I have no idea what you're going through. That's an auto response, and I don't know how you feel, but I know somebody who does. And I just said, man, I love you, and I'm here for you. We get together. And I just began to pray with him. And praise the Lord, he didn't pull the trigger, and he came back, and God began to work in his life. But it was a great lesson I learned that day, not to go into this auto response mode, especially nowadays when people are dealing with PTSD and so many emotional issues. We have to be careful not to just throw a scripture nonchalantly in somebody's face. We have to be willing to listen, to really hear them.
Yeah. How powerful that it sounds like, the Spirit kind of grabbed a hold of you in that moment and helped you kind of course correct in the sense of, wait a minute, no, I don't. And that was humility to come back to him, even though he had yelled at you, and make space for him to be validated that, hey, I don't really have it figured out, but I care about you. And I know that that's, the well-meaning intention of most of us is we care. We don't know what to do, but we can practice kind of just letting God be God in that moment. And just because somebody's struggling with something, we don't have to have the answer for them. In fact, it's going to be so much better when they're able to wrestle with God and let God give them the answers. There's time to give wisdom and all that, but that validation and just the opportunity to actually share emotional pain in an honest way is huge, huge.
Yeah, amen. I love that. I've had to learn that the hard way more than once. Early on in ministry, I felt like I had to have the answer, and I would just say anything to have an answer. And of course, I learned pretty quick that it's best to say, you know what, I don't got a clue. I don't know, but I do know this. I know Jesus will sustain you, and I know that He can use me to just be with you right now, and we can find the answer together. So let's. Speaking of the answer, I mean, how has God brought healing in your life, Jolene?
Well, it has been interesting to me that it's been through a number of different things. Sometimes we talk about a particular aspect of emotional health, let's say depression or anxiety, and we'll hear different things that can be helpful, and they may be true, but they're not usually complete. And what God tends to do, in my observation, and what he's done in my own life, is he works through whatever means he chooses to work through. And so when I say that, I'm encouraging kind of a whole person perspective, that I had to kind of talk with him about whether or not I was going to seek out medication for help. What part was physiological and could be, helped with simple things like exercise. But the biggest thing for me, I wasn't able to do those things initially. I'm finally working out today, and that's taken years. But initially, God was starting to reveal belief systems that I'd held on to my whole life. And so one of them, for example, was that I kind of saw myself as God's protector, and I wasn't able to receive his protection of me. I knew these things from a young age. I had grown up in a Lutheran church. I knew the right things to believe and that kind of thing. But when he revealed that he was not only my protector, but he asked, I had experienced, let me put that back. I had opportunities to experience him in that way by choosing to remember what he had said and act as if I already believed it. So, for example, a situation happened with a person, and I had to stand up for myself, and I was terrified. But then I was able to kind of step back with God and speak up and do what I needed to do. And within a couple of hours, I experienced a tremendous relief of fear. That was one thing that he had done. Another thing was through EMDR. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I won't go into all the detail of that, but people can look it up or they can contact me for more information. The bottom line is it's a natural way of releasing trauma that's actually stored in your brain. And it is also tied with belief systems that affect how we operate. So through various I went through a few different counselors in several years, and I still go back to one counselor on occasion. The EMDR therapy was super powerful in not only my ability to receive some things from God, but a physiological release of some of that fear that actually lived in what felt like every cell of my body. Wow. So those are a few of the ways that he worked through it. And then another one is through Unleash Sheets, which is a tool that came out of a really hard season when I was trying to write. I couldn't write, and I thought, I'll create a planner because I can't write. As if creating a planner would be easier. And all I really wanted was, I'm a self-reflective kind of person, and so I had all these questions that I kept asking, and I thought if I had a planner where people asked these questions, they could kind of engage with God in these self-reflective ways, and God could reveal things in their lives. And so what ended up happening is I took those questions, I started seeing that they were something completely different, and God, I felt, gave me direction and kind of reshaping the organization of them. And so out of that came a tool that helped me and has already helped hundreds of others process life challenges, process just hearing from God, identifying unhealthy belief systems, working out and identifying emotions that they may not be aware of, and experiencing God's presence in those moments. So I still use that today.
Excellent, excellent. Well, tell us about Rise Up Writers.
Rise Up Writers started a few years ago when I felt like God said, encourage authors. And it was kind of out of the blue. And I said, well, I don't know any, so you're going to have to help me. and within a few weeks, I went to a local retreat, and I met several authors and writers, and it started to become a little bit more clear. I got the name Rise Up Writers, and I just started with a newsletter. And my sense at the time was, Christian writers face obstacles of the enemy trying to keep them from doing the work that God's called them to do, and their own fears and struggles and the enemy attacks are keeping them from doing what God's called them to do. And we need their words. And then you have platform tension on top of that. And because people feel icky about that, rather than recognizing just an opportunity to serve well to other people, I want to encourage people in that place. So Rise Up Writers is really more of a collective effort. I have more people that help me on that team because it's not my primary focus, but it's about practical and spiritual care for the life of a writer.
Excellent. Well, I even as a published author, I still struggle with writing and getting stuck and needing help myself. So there's I know there are so many people out there that are going to benefit from Unleash Sheets and Rise Up Writers. So why don't you just tell our listeners, viewers right now, how they can get more information about Rise Up Writers, how they can get information about Unleash Sheets, and how they can learn from you and follow you on social media, all the above. Tell us where to go.
Great.
What do we do?
Well, so I think one of the best places to start is JoleneUnderwood.com.
Okay.
And if your primary focus is just in the writing or any Christian communication, this could be also entrepreneurs, and it's any kind of writing or speaking, it's RiseUpWriters.com. So I have two separate sites. And at JoleneUnderwood.com, you'll find Unleash Sheets. It should be easy. It's JoleneUnderwood.com/unleash. On social media, I'm the Jolene U, pretty much everywhere at the Jolene U. And both my blog with the Unleash Sheets and Rise Up Writers recently came together for what became an on-the-go retreat package. It was a live event, and I'm in the process of changing it up to be a retreat package for really creatives who face the challenges like you were talking about. We did a weekend retreat using Unleash Sheets and focusing on obstacles like comparison and ambition and rejection, so that we can work these out with God and be released to do the work that God's called us out to do.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I really appreciate your time, Jolene. Thank you so much. Really, really. I mean, 20 minutes goes fast when we're going to have you back. So
I love that. Thank you, Chuck. It's been an honor to talk with you today.
Oh, it's been excellent to have you here. And for those of you that are perhaps just joining us at the very end, we have been visiting with emotional health warrior and soul care mentor Jolene Underwood. And like she said, you can get more information from her at JoleneUnderwood.com. For those of you interested in Rise Up Writers, you can go to RiseUpWriters.com. From one fellow writer to another, we all face resistance. In fact, the focus of my next book is plowing through resistance to live the life God intends for us to live and to receive all that God has for us. So resistance is something that we all need help breaking through. So guys, take advantage. Go to Jolene's website. Again, that's JoleneUnderwood.com, RiseUpWriters.com. You can follow Jolene on social media at the Jolene U. There you have it. So, Jolene, once again, thanks so much for hanging out on 41 Strong today.
Thank you.
All right. Well, guys, again, my guest has been Jolene Underwood. So for our producer, Mike Sable, I'm Chuck Tate. We look forward to seeing you next week on 41 Strong.
PeoriaLife.com